Okay, this is a little video to summarize some of the stuff I've learned this summer. So first, let's start with the black hole. So I managed to create a refraction effect that refracts the outside of this sphere, and it sort of warps light around, so you can see. Yeah, and there I use it in conjunction with some physics, so pulls me to it. I learned how to make some hand-painted fire particle effects, and just use how to use cascades particle emitters better in general. And there it is, the same one on the right being used as a fireball. I learned how to make some nose erosion and distortion in UV, so I really kicked off with the UV distortion studies this summer. And let's go a little more in depth with this one. So this, right, is controlled by a bunch of parameters here that you can adjust, and it controls the strength. The emissive strength is just how bright it is, but fade, lightning panner, lets me pan it. How fast it electrocutes, basically. And the noise strength. Now this is where it starts getting crazy, right? The more noise you add to distort it, the crazier it gets, and then it just starts looking more like a force field than it does an actual lightning bolt, which is pretty cool. And yeah, there's some multipliers, some speeds, a lot of customization. This was a tornado I tried making. So all of these are scrolling textures that are basically applied to a mesh, and they scroll across the UVs up and down repeatedly, and they create this tornado effect. This is not a particle system, I was just playing around with it. And I really got into vector fields now. Vector fields are super cool. So vector fields and GPU particles let you put a bunch of particles on screen at the same time. But vector fields allow you to sort of create forces, such as this attraction effect I made, which is really cool. Right? I have a whole tower of effects here. I have this swiggly vector field that's rotating, and it sort of creates like this dust effect, and you can also absorb this. So it's sort of like the Minecraft EXP. Oh, I fell. And we have a sun one here. I also learned, not that one, I made my own little fire part, my own little blood effect, right? You can change this to water or whatever, but I hand painted this blood, and I learned how to make it spawn out like a burst, which is a really nice effect. And here's me going crazy with it, testing out how you can bounce particles against walls. These are all one sprite, but if I had a variety, it looked even better. And here is a particle effect I created in Substance Designer. All these little parts, all the little patterns are all made in Substance Designer procedurally. And then I animated them in a particle system. So all I was really doing is rotating. This is me testing out some explosions. It's not done, but basically it's a sprite sheet of an explosion that I recorded. And yeah, you can spawn it out, the sheets over time, and it looks smooth. It's not done though. Here are some more traditional impacts. So here are some more traditional impacts for a more cartoony game I'm working on right now. I've just started with these, but I have a whole bunch set up. Looks like the shaders aren't compiled for all of them, but basically I can create these using the different RGB channels, and there's a different texture hidden within each channel, so it's very efficient. Alright, now it's time to get to the really cool stuff. So remember that black hole back there? Well, this is using a similar effect. Basically, I am using a refraction effect to get this cutting. Now, what's cutting it is this black and white texture. It's half and half. When you look at it from the front, it looks perfectly fine. Right? It lines up for the most part. Well, I can't line it up anymore. But once you start looking at it from an angle, it starts distorting. If I were to increase some of these, this is the top one, yeah. If I were to start increasing or decreasing some of these, you'll notice it gets a little crazier. You can also swap these out for literally anything, like this laser gradient. Now, the reason I got the samurai cut was because this was half. So half is cut and the other half isn't. So it just appears like it's being cut and split. And it looks really cool. Could work very well with some cuts. Now, I started getting a little crazy. This you'll see over here, but a little more stylized. It's pretty aesthetic. So this is a water material that is able to be affected by lighting information from lights. That way you can control its look using lights, as opposed to the unlit ones I am using here. So yeah, so these, if you put a light, they can be brighter or darker, right? And which might be the effect you're going for. They also shake a little. The resolution of this plane isn't very high, so the shaking might not be as great as it could be, but basically you can, using the same information, the same technique, you can make waves if you have a higher poly mesh, such as this one. Now this is when I started getting into really cool stuff, and here's where I went a little crazy with the refraction. So you can see, you can sort of make things look like they're breaking, right? Get some really distorted warps in there. So this is when I started doing a couple more studies, more in-depth to things. This is a stylized water material. Hold on. Okay. So as you can see, it has waves going on it, right? And what I am doing is basically I am panning this caustics texture in several directions, and when they overlap, they create unique caustics. Here is the same material, except protruding from the center using a radial. And here is actually the same material as this one. It looks different, but the reason why this one is clearer and possibly more realistic is because the opacity for it is lower. Now, let me put a sphere. Yeah, so this has a lower opacity compared to this one, right? And this one, you can sort of see it better in a lake or environment. Now, the downside to this water is that, while it is pretty cheap for the most part, well, actually, no, this one is cheaper. While this one is pretty cheap for the most part, you cannot affect how it looks using lighting. So I can't put a light bulb in there, and well, it looks different, but that's because it's affecting the bricks in the ground behind it, but it actually cannot be affected by light. At least the surface can't. And this one is also the same material. So all four of these are one material, and with just different parameters, different numbers being tweaked, and you can get different looks, right? So this is like a variation of this one, and where I'm making the caustics the more visible and the water in the middle slightly less so, and it starts looking more like an aura. And here you can see the water material being used in a form of a particle. Well, not really particle, but just an example of how you can use it for other stuff other than regular water. Now, yeah, so here's how you can shatter space, basically, with refractions. Similar effect, except I practiced using different kinds of planes. So this is a circular mesh as opposed to a regular plane. I tried to reduce some transparency. And here are the results. This one's a little distorted, but it was just a study. Now this one's really cool. This is a ice material that is completely procedural. Did I make an instance? Hold on. Are these all using? Yeah, they're all using the same. Hold on. 1 second. I'm going to make an instance. Okay. Let me apply this. Looks like I didn't make any parameters. But basically, I am grabbing the normals, the directions that the faces are facing. And anything below a certain, if it faces a certain direction in the z-axis, it is not affected by this tessellation effect that's going on. So it makes some really believable ice, at least snow-covered ice or rocks. And it has some subsurface scattering going on to make it look real nice with the lights. Although the geometry can get a little buggy. Okay. Additionally, here's like, if you were to walk in here, you could sort of still see the bottom of your feet, but you can't see all the way down. Unless you went under it, of course. But you can always... And here's like a fog. And I added a little blur effect if you had the camera below. Now, here's some other cool stuff. So, bump offset. I might have shown you a couple of you guys this in action. But, yeah. So, notice how, when I look at this from different directions, it looks like the ice is above the rocks. But in reality, the rocks and the ice are on the same, they're all just on a plane, see? Right? So this is a cool effect you can get with bump offset. Here's how I did it if you're interested. Right? So here's the rocks, here's the ice, yada yada yada. Here's some of the numbers I used for it. And there you go. I've also made a couple of studies for eroding materials. So let's see, this one should compile soon. If I were to increase or decrease this, notice how it goes in and out. And I was studying different methods of being able to do this. Now, here's one erode study. If I go to materials studies, here's some other ones. So linear fade instance. Right? So if I increase or decrease the fade, or bring these back to default, here I was testing fading out different parts of the mesh. So I can selectively choose if I want the back of the fire to start burning out first, or the front. Be more selective, right? And then you can completely animate these live in the particle system. Here's a study of some UV distortion. So if I increase and choose a different texture, let's choose this Gaussian noise. Here's just, I made a little study of how using noise textures you can distort an image. Here's that water from before. You can increase or decrease its opacity to change its look. It's more like blood, to be honest, but you can change its color if you'd like to anything. It also sort of looks like fire. It's a mix of both. It's weird. And that actually might have changed the water here. Yep. Does not look great. Okay. Anything else? Radio glow. Oh yeah. So up here, just added a this ppm snow. Basically, just scrolls a snow texture across your screen. Might be helpful. And yeah, so only other thing I would have left to show would be some practice I did with some shaders. But basically, I use the so if you've ever played Sekiro, there's an effect where things close to you are visible, but everything else is dark. But lights from far away can be seen, which is more real to real life, where you can see a spotlight being shown on the floor from far away. Okay, so once you get closer to things, they slowly become more revealed. And right now, it's a little harsh, the line, but I have parameters set up to feather the outside of this circle. So notice when I get closer to it, it gets brighter. And this is different from having a movable light, because you can basically keep all this nice baked information, the high quality lighting, you can bake it and just reveal it or hide it using this. So you don't have to have a light on you all the time that's always calculating shadows, which is very performant. Here's a little breakdown of it. I get the area around you. And then I basically divide the lit data by the unlit data. And yeah, that's what I get. There's a bunch of other cool stuff I learned, like how to make my own FX materials, how to make, just in general, make things scroll, or how to move vertices around, how to distort an object's actual like shape. I've also made toon shaders and outline shaders. So it's been a pretty productive summer. Oh, and I am working on stencils, which allow you to isolate a specific object in the scene and only add an effect to it in the post-processing settings, which is great. This video might have dragged on a little long, but here's a bit of what I made.